Should be good now. Hey everyone, it's Dave Lawlor, Cloud Solution Architect with Microsoft, and we're going to start here very quickly to intro the Windows Virtual Desktop. First, I want to thank our host, Net Gratitude, for having us in, providing some great food. Those at home are missing out, but thank you for inviting us. So we're just going to get going pretty quickly so we can get through this all. Hold on, why is this not working? Just a second. There we go. Off. That's nice.
Can you test it and see?
Can you hear me now? Yes? All right. Somehow the mic got turned off again, but we're back. So we will start going through that again. So the best virtualized end user experience per Microsoft, the platform of your choice, it basically allows you to connect into RDP, your virtual desktops using any platform. Whether that be Windows, Mac, HTML5, Android, and as I was mentioning before I got cut off, Linux is rolling out and thin clients are becoming more and more adopted, but it's all based on the SDK that Microsoft released to the vendors, so they're slowly adding it up. Some of the things you'll see is Windows Virtual Desktop acts like Windows when it's installed with the new RDP client. It's in the Start menu. You actually see it in the Start menu to connect. It supports multi-monitors now, which is a huge feature for the RDP client, right? Before it used to be a real pain with multi-monitors trying to switch now. Now it natively supports it and you can switch through. It supports multiple cameras. Sound is better, printing enhancements along. Containerized profiles. FSLogix was a huge buy for Microsoft at the time. To be able to, and we'll get into that a little bit more later, but being able to very quickly load up a user profile for each when they load, no matter what host they go to. Outlook, OneDrive have all been rewritten. The clients were rewritten to go to a per machine install instead of a per user install, which speeds up quite a bit. It changes the way some of the search functions work, but it also allows you to do some containerized features around that with FSLogix to speed up the different versions on virtual desktop. The other thing that's coming out that we don't talk about a lot is Teams enhancement. It's in a private preview right now. It's coming out more and more. Teams will work on Windows Virtual Desktop as well as it does on Citrix now, natively without having to pay Citrix for the extra licensing fees. It's rolling out quickly. It becomes more of a peer-to-peer service. I'm not going to go too much into it in this one because it is pretty technical. The other thing, 365 Pro Plus is also supported on Windows Server 2019 now with the OneDrive files on demand. So you don't always have to keep everything local. It'll download it, but interact like it's part of the, like it's already on the desktop with just placeholders. So, as we said, WPD allows users to connect from any device of their choice. The local remote UI is optimized for various form factors across all. As I said, the Linux SDK is rolled out now and allows partners to build it. And Windows experiences are built just like it's from native. Remote apps act like local apps. They install into the start menu. They're searchable from the start menu. Users are much easier to connect. A lot of times when you publish remote apps, it was jumping through hoops to get users to connect into it, depending on what platform you're working on. Now it just acts like Windows. So again, the end users, this gives you kind of an idea of the way we were talking about. The HTML5 browser looks like this. I'll show a live demo on this in a bit. Start menu integration, you can see now things look like it's supposed to in the start menu. And then of course workspaces comes through the mobile apps. You can connect from anywhere basically. I found this slide. I was working with somebody who showed it to me. This is basically a Tesla that someone had connected to a WVD host pole and was working out of their car. So, and when I say it can work from anywhere, and this is the web broker, if you haven't seen it before, it works from any of the HTML5 classes, it's working. So you're starting to see more video graphic. They really worked on improving the RDP client along with this to allow less bandwidth to go with it. Video playback uses hardware acceleration. It's very smooth. You can actually watch videos, be it remotely. If you can move the window around, it'll still play smoothly, as it says. And then the 4K downsampling. It just gives a better experience all around. Device redirection, I kind of touched on this a little bit. Now, the new client allows you to use multiple cameras and redirect them. Frame rates are up and it's less network bandwidth. The printing messages in the old RDP client was always kind of hit and miss. It didn't work really well, to be honest, and you had issues controlling it. The new one works better. There's new group policies that are going to be rolled out to kind of help work with your users and keep them. I know my clients in particular don't want home printing, right? If they're connected, they don't want them to be able to redirect the printers local, and you can control that. So you start getting into more of the MFA, right? So the old RDP client wouldn't support MFA for the most part. You could use some third parties to integrate in, but now it natively comes out. Windows Hello for Business, if you are rolling that out. Some are, some aren't. I believe it'll get more popular, but we'll see. Dynamically adapting bandwidth utilization. So this is an interesting thing. So I know when you talk about Citrix clients, they're usually around the 45K is the optimum bandwidth for that, for the end user side. The Windows RDP is higher. You normally see it around 100. So that it's just, you have to know that. It's just the way they're getting better at it. They're trying to get it down. It's just not as mature. And hopefully as more iterations go through, as we start to see more adoption and just more teams, it's going to get more mature and better. I will say that internally, Microsoft has stated this is going to be a big push next year for WPD. It's going to become something that we really invest in and one of the KPIs for the internal teams to work with. Dynamic resolution and scaling. So this is cool. So when you're moving around the client, and I'll show a demo of this later, it resizes easily. When I move it from window to window, it'll automatically expand and contract without loss. That was something you couldn't do with the old one. It would get crazy and it would go off screen. Exploding coding, that's fine. So security. everybody wants to know the security. So when you set up your WVD, VDI in the past, you basically had to manage all your security from the broker side all the way down to the host side. Microsoft's taking that over. It is a platform as a service. It will tie in with your Azure Active Directory. Why is that important? Because now you can control it with access policies, right? So if you only want certain people to log in from certain areas, you can of course set that up. MFA requirements across the board. Now, if you work with Azure Active Directory, you know MFA and some of the other more unique conditional access policies, stuff like that requires different licenses. So I just want to point that out. It generally requires a P1 or P2 licensing to use those features. So while we say a lot of this is Windows Virtual Desktop can be cost effective, when you start adding some of the bells and whistles like that, you're going to have some additional licensing costs. Reverse connectivity basically works like a reverse proxy, less surface area to attack, right? You don't have to worry about it coming back in. Granular access controls, you can, I have a better slide for this in a second, but basically multiple admins, instead of being one admin who could run everything in the different hosts, you can granularly do it to host pools, tenant, user access, mostly like most enterprises do now, right? And there's always a separation between using one and the other. So this is kind of where we're talking about where we're going from, right? So on-prem virtualization, security servers manually deployed, MFA, conditional access. Some places are doing it well, some places aren't. It's just the way it is. It's very hit or miss. So what WVD really does is makes it easily configured and standardized, right? We know there's always going to be certain things. If you want to enable it, you may have to pay for the licensing, but literally in most cases, it's going to be a couple of policies you have to set up and you're done. And they're all built in.
Okay. For those who are joining, we have food and drinks over here. Feel free to grab a seat.
So the reverse connect eliminates the need to open inbound ports. A lot of times, depending on the services you're doing, your ports could get open and you really have to watch what you're doing for your WAFs and taking care of that. Now that Microsoft is handling the gateways on that and the brokerages, we're taking care of it. You're gonna, our security services are top notch around this. We spend a ton of money doing this. And so you're gonna start to see some of the benefits of moving that away and more secure. I just had a discussion with one of the security guys for one of the larger beverage companies in the world. And they're totally on board with this. They're fine. They're moving from their Citrix to this, and they're good with it. We were going through the different security policies. So the main benefits: reduced exposure to attacks, less time monitoring inbound ports, and focus alerts on access and identity-based attacks. So basically, it ties in because it's Azure. It ties into monitoring. And I'll go into this a little bit later. This is more just a general overview at the start. But Azure monitoring and alerts all tie in because it's a native service now. So you can set up your playbooks and run your security off of it and get real-time alerts on a lot of this, like you would any of the other Azure security features. So this is kind of where we're talking about the different rights. In on-prem, usually the security admin just has full rights across the board, no matter what they're trying to do. And now you can kind of move it along to the owner, operator, contributor, depending on what level they need to work at. So if you only need that admin only needs to publish apps. You don't have to give them rights to your whole tenant. You can just give them rights to publish apps. So, like anything else in Azure, if you work in Azure, you know RBAC's used, right? Role-based access. So we want to do very granular controls. Now, just because we enable it and allow you to doesn't mean users always do it, right? We have plenty of clients who give global admin to a ton of people. Just let them look crazy. He knows. Oh my God. So it's there. I recommend using it. So one of the biggest benefits you start to see is the multi-session, Windows 10 multi-session in WVD. So in single session, just to go through it for those who may not know, it's 1 VM per user as they go. So Windows 10, one user gets tied 1 VM. So as you add more users to your workforce, your cost exponentially goes up as you start adding hosts into your host pool. So now we come out with Windows 10 multi-session, and what that basically is one to many. So again, depending on what you're doing, that one to many can do various sizing. Microsoft does have some requirements, or recommendations. that we'll go into in a little bit. But generally what you can see is for medium level users, you can generally stack 4 users to a core. If you'll ever see. Heavy, you want about 2, and then light, which is just web-based stuff, maybe they're using Office Web, that kind of thing. Generally, you can stack 6. And I will say, that's a good point, the users are always isolated. So even though it's a multi-session, Windows 10 almost acts like a server in that regard, that everything's isolated for the users. So when you start to talk about, there's always hogs that get on, right? They're going to go on and they're going to open up a millions row spreadsheet that's just going to take everybody else. There's basically what's called fair use CPU and fair use memory configurations and the brokers in the background that basically the box will notice that, and Windows 10 will start cutting it off and limiting based on how many people are on the session and only give them the ability. So what's that mean to that user? They're going to be pretty unhappy with the experience, right? But in that case, not everybody on that host is going to be unhappy.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
Shared things like DLLs between sessions. So if 2 users are running the same application, are they still loading up the full application stack in each environment, or within the user context?
Within the user context, but it also depends on the program, right? So I don't know if you're here when I was in the first slide. So Office is being rewritten, right? You see Outlook was rewritten for a lot of stuff. Teams is being rewritten. OneDrive is rewritten. It's kind of per machine drive. So now so you don't see that load when they're running those kind of workloads now, that they would load up a full stack for everyone. Sure. They're doing a shared stack at some point, but the individual contributions, like their parts of it, their shared memory is separate.
That's not out there, right? Is that version of Office on WVD available?
Yeah, today? So that's on the marketplace.
Okay, version. Gotcha.
The OneDrive is available, the Teams is not. The Teams is in a preview.
Okay.
If you want to play with it, you just got to contact whoever your Microsoft rep is and get it onboarded into the.
Yeah, the memory segmentation was going to be my question, because my thought was if you could get the program to access arbitrary memory addresses, you could start with other people to do.
So, yes, if they have the rights, right? So for the most part, in multi-session, this is also, I should bring up, in multi-session, they're not admin users. So they have no ability to install it and run it. So for what you're talking about, they have to have special tools, right? They have to be able to install. They can't.
Or have an exploit program.
Yes, but again, what they can run and what they can't. If you lock down your policy, you can clear that, right? Because you're controlling the machine. Now, that's not true in single sessions. They can be admin users here. That's generally where you would stick your power users who need to install stuff, who need that kind of thing. And the other new thing in WVD, we'll touch on it briefly, is you can assign people to specific VMs, right? So if you know that a dev always loads the same thing or needs the same tool set, you can send them back. You can physically assign him or logically assign him to that VM in that host pool, so he always goes back.
And the user doesn't have to designate the server?
No, it automatically does in the broker service, because it's tied to his Azure Active Directory. So when he comes in, he'll be directed to that other broker service. So again, the user experience, when you start talking about this, so this is a Microsoft slide, of course. It's very grandiose because managing WVD right now is a pain, to be straight out. If you've been in there, it's hard to do, right? They did an app service, and it gets a little bit better if you run the management app. The management app has its flaws and issues also. It runs as an app service. It's going to get better. I can't tell you exactly when. It's on the roadmap, and it will be getting better. And it will eventually become part of the portal and run like a PaaS service does for everything else. It's just not there yet. But it is on the roadmap, and it is coming. Because the product team is very knowledgeable that people are unhappy with the management experience. Having to add every user by hand or by one in PowerShell or the management tool is such an oversight. Not being able to use groups, right? So that's the other thing. You can't add users to host pools by groups, which would solve a lot of the issue. That's coming too. I can't give you a date on it, but they do know that that's something they need to move up. So from both desktop and remote app. So in this case, everything's controlled through the single broker, right? So when you publish, whether you're publishing desktops or publishing apps, you can publish it in streams to your users based on their Azure Active Directory. And no matter where they log in, they're going to see the same experience. Whether it be the web broker, the RDP client, their iPhone, their Tesla, if you saw that slide. So it's just to be able to manage, it's all in the same place for them. So when you can manage, and there's the other thing around this also is you can lower, there's called app masking, where you can start to publish your apps via Azure Active Directory. So you can limit your, in the old days, like in Citrix, you might have, 20 golden images depending on the user profile. Now you can have 2 or 3 maybe, and use app masking to publish that correctly. So only people in this host pool or this group will get this app. So it's a way, even though all these other apps may still be loaded on the golden image, it kind of limits the way we can expose them.
Is there an HTML5 RDP client? Part of the
I'll show it to you. I'm sorry. Don't. So you're starting to get into where, right now, VDI, there's a lot of different tools that goes around. You have the Windows Server underlying, then you probably have Citrix on top, or maybe you're using VM Horizon, and then you have the Windows client. So now you're starting to see the built-in tools with WBD. Everything's kind of timed out. Now I will say, we support all those partners. We love our partners. We're not cutting Citrix out by any means. We're not cutting out Horizon. You can run those on WBD. What we're basically making is easier to access the host. To be able, so a lot of times you may get into a VDI architecture that just wasn't sized correctly, right? That happens all the time. By using WBD, we kind of changed that. If you need to expand out, you just open up another host pool. It's literally a 6-minute thing. And you're up and running with another host pool. You can use your same images. And you can handle that workload for a short amount of time. And maybe it goes away because of a specific project. I know another client I have is looking for a specific, they hire interns and they do certain short-term contractors. And they're just going to give them WBD desktops because they don't want to keep those desktops around. Another client I was looking at talking to for disaster recovery. They used to keep laptops stacked on site, right? And they are going to literally distribute these at a rally point. Well, now they're going to Windows Virtual Desktop because they can bring your own device. They don't have to go do a specific thing to get into the network. They can literally sit at home, connect in, and they're working. So they don't have to keep those laptops patched. They don't have to keep that image up to date. They don't have to worry about, does it still work? Who's keeping track of those assets? And more importantly, you didn't have to spend money. You could use that money for other things. So as you start to get in more, there's the advanced diagnostic services. Again, it's very PowerShell centric. If you are not up on PowerShell, you're going to have, at the moment, a rough time working with WBD. You need to be able to work in PowerShell, especially if you're having problems. The only way to get into the diagnostic side is through WBD. I shouldn't say they won't. So they did publish an app recently. I haven't had a chance to really test it out yet because I just use PowerShell. But they did do it for those that may need to try it outside of PowerShell. And also, the broker side, the other nice thing is you only are running the host side. If there's an issue outside the broker, Microsoft techs have probably already seen it because we're covered as a PaaS service. We generally will have a wider network of people going wrong before you see it. Hopefully, you're not one of the first people to see the issue, and we're already taking care of it. But you can also open support tickets, right? So Azure, if you have your support contracts, you can open it, say, hey, this just isn't working, and someone's going to get back to you. So again, we're starting to get into the part where WBD will work on APIs, right? That's the beauty of most PaaS services in Azure. It's all API-based. You don't have to worry about how things are. It's always going to work, be integrated the same way. Our partners are starting to use that more. Citrix is very big on that right now. partnering with us to be able to offer some more of their advanced services on top of the WVD platform. Let's talk about what a deployment overview looks like. So when you look at stuff in the typical fashion, you'll see what's managed by Microsoft, right? The web access, diagnostics, gateway management, broker, load balancing, all those things are out of your hands. You basically just enable your users and your back in your hand. What do you control? Your host, your image. You can either use the images in the marketplace, and there are 2 or 3, or you can use your own. Make your own, upload it, whatever you want to do. But what you usually can't do, again, the Windows 10 Enterprise Multi-Session, that's a marketplace. And there's 2 flavors you'll see in the marketplace. There's one that has 365 Pro already installed, and there's one that doesn't. And generally what you see is medium and light user. So I would use the multi-session tenant for users who are using Office Web or Office through the web, right? They don't really need to have any programs loaded. They just need a desktop. Maybe they're doing some data entry or some process entry into local websites or local web apps. But if you need to have the actual people in the spreadsheets, that kind of thing, that are loaded to get better performance, then you use the one with the Office 365. And then, of course, the other end of it is all the compute storage on the back end. Like everything in the Azure, we manage all that site. This is important too, as these start to come out, we're going to let you manage your images however you are currently managing your images. If you're using SCCM, continue to use SCCM. If you're going to use Intune, use Intune. However you're currently using, it's probably going to work in the end with us. So the one thing I will flag on the Intune comment though, it does not currently work with multi-session. It is coming, but all the other ones work. SCCM was very recently updated to be able to use multi-session. There's a setting in there that basically can flag it to use multi-session and it'll start looking at it. So some of the prerequisites here. You got to choose an identity strategy, whether you're going to use the Azure Active Directory domain services, you're going to put in a domain controller up in Azure, or if you're going to do an express route or VPN so your hosts can phone. All hosts have to be domain joined. It's not an option. So you have to follow one of these 3, whichever case may be for your specific environment. Are you going to use FSLogix profiles? I would encourage you to do it. It's free. It comes with your licensing. If you have licensing for WVD, you have licensing for FSLogix. For those of you who don't know, Microsoft bought FSLogix. We don't own it. It's not available outside of Microsoft. We're not. If you currently have licensing contracts, those are still valid, but we are not selling it to anybody anymore. It's part of our platform. So the way you can do it right now is through a file server, through Azure Files, Azure AVDS, but let's be clear about this. This does not have MPFS access to this, right? So Azure Files does not carry through. Now the meta is there, the metadata is there, and I can tell you right now, there's a private preview that has Azure Files working off Active Directory and carrying over the NPF permissions from on-prem. It's not private. You can get into it. It's only available in one zone, France. So if you want to store your files in France, you can play with this. Though it's going to be rolling out soon. I think they told me second quarter, maybe second or third quarter, that'll be rolling out fully. But then Azure NetApp, and I actually recommend the Azure NetApp files. It's a little pricey, but the performance really is there. It's a good performance value for the cost. The only problem I have with NetApp files is it's a 4 terabyte commitment. You can't get anything smaller than 4 terabytes to start with.
Remind me, why do you need to use FSLogix? Or why would you?
So FSLogix is the profile containerization. So what used to happen is when you log in, if you had multiple hosts, say you had a host pool with 10 hosts. So if I log into host 1 the first time, it's going to load my profile, and like you would anytime you log in something, right? So it happens the first time. It's generally slow. It's downloading what it needs to download. It creates what it needs to do. But now I disconnect, and tomorrow when I log in, I get shunted to host 3. So now I got the whole thing going over again, right? My profile's got to be rebuilt because it's not there anymore. So what FSLogix allows it to do is it stores that profile on persistent storage off the host. And so what you start seeing now is it connects to it. So when you log in, it's just going to connect to your profile. So all that building, all the Outlook cache, all that doesn't have to be rebuilt from scratch. So when you go to set this up for the first time, you're going to need a global admin, you're going to need a subscription admin, you're going to need a local admin, Active Directory administrator. This was actually my sticking point in my last deployment like 2 weeks ago. They didn't have a local a local Active Directory admin available for me. So that took almost a day to rectify. And then a WBD tenant admin. And that's just a role. So to be clear, you just add that this is just a role that you add. It doesn't give them a lot of power, it just gives them the ability to create tenants. So this is kind of how you see it play out when you start to look at this, right? So this is the clients. The admin overall control this part of the Windows Virtual Desktop. And then the subscription admin is what has to set up your Azure subscription. Your global admin has to enable the ability to use the WBD apps. And you only use it the first time you enable it. The global admin right only needs to be used once. Once you enable the WBD enterprise applications, it's done. You're good. You can run all you want after that. Because then basically what you transfer to is to the WBD admin takes over from that part. So you create the apps and you authorize the apps, and then you allow the WBD admins to be owners of those apps, and then they control everything past that. So again, the requirements must route to a Windows Server Active Directory. Doesn't care where it's at, but it's got a route to it. They'll realize that when you spin up Azure VMs, there's a default, on virtual networks, there's always the default DNS, right? So normally that's Azure DNS unless you come into. So when these VMs come up, you have to have them on a subnet or a VNet that knows to use a DNS that's in the Active Directory domain, or at least knows how to find it. So that's an important thing to know when you come through. They have to be, AD and Azure AD have to be in sync. Because the users, when I show you the login procedure, it'll make more sense, but those have to be using AD Connect and be in sync. The other way around it is use Azure Active Directory Domain Services, which is automatically in sync with AAD. VMs must always join the domain. So again, identity strategies, if you know you have to have a DC if you're going to use that. Whether you're going to put it in there, this is just the pros and cons. At this point, you have to be mature about how your Active Directory is set up and how your identity strategies. I'm hoping that you're not looking at WBD as what you're using to identify your strategy. You should already have if you're in Azure and you're thinking about WBD, you should already have your identity strategies figured out pretty well. If not, I would definitely talk to your Microsoft reps if you have it. CSAs like myself will come in and help you identify the different requirements, or other partners also. So the way that recommend this, yeah. So we recommend that you use the Azure AD and domain services if you're a cloud. So if you have no on-prem, don't set up a DC. Just use domain services. Now, what are the pros cons against domain services? It's more expensive than a VM, quite honestly. But you don't have to patch it. It's a PaaS service. So you do pay a little bit more, but you don't have to maintain it. It just works. Oh, I will, that's bad. The one other thing I will mention about that is Azure ADDS doesn't have group policies. So if you're going to be using things with group policies, you have to have domain control or be able to touch a domain control. So basically when you roll out a tenant, you're going to grant Azure AD consent. That's where I said the global admin was going to be used. You literally go to a web page, log in with the global admin, and grant consent. And then you're gonna assign a tenant creator. That's back where I told you we'd go back into the enterprise apps and give specific users access to the tenant creator. And then you create your tenant through PowerShell, because there's no other way to do it at this point. So again, you have to be comfortable with PowerShell to go through that. So I was going to do a live demo, and I found out that, as I was explaining to some people earlier, the tenant that I use got enrolled into a private preview, unbeknownst to me 2 days ago. So I am unable to show that live because I can't. So I was able to record one off someone else that let me log in and use their tenant. So I'm going to play that video really quick, and I'll kind of walk through it with you as we're playing it. Hopefully this works. So I saved you all the need to squint at my PowerShell. I actually used the portal to play this, so we can kind of walk through it. So it's easy. You go to the marketplace. You're just going to do a quick search, and you'll find it. Just do Windows Virtual Desktop, host pools. It'll come up. Provisional host pool. I try to edit this down a little bit so it wasn't so long. Go ahead and create. So what you're going to see now is some of the things where you have to do. That should pause and pause. No. Where's my mouse? Doesn't look like it's coming up. There it is.
Can you rename the host pool?
Yes. No, you can give it a front name. So, and you showed it. So when you go through this, you're basically like most other PaaS services, right? You're going to go to subscription. You're going to give it a resource group. You're going to stick it in a region you want. The host pool name has, now this is important. The host pool name is going to have to be unique, right? Because it's a brokered worldwide service, it's going to have to be unique. So you're going to have to come up with a naming convention. You can go through pool to personal. Again, the difference between this is using the pooled, you're going to have the multi-session, and the personal is more one-to-one. Default desktop users. Okay, this is the part where I was saying maintenance of, or sometimes the maintenance on this side is kind of annoying. You have to add the desktop users you want in here, at least at the start, separated by account. You can also do it via PowerShell. That's how I do it. If I have a long list, I basically do a recursive PowerShell and dump it in so it runs through them all. But you always want to add at least 1 or 2 users in here so you can test it off the bat. But then, of course, there's a default desktop users group within the host, and that's where you add. It's an app group, and that's where you add. It's always the same, and it's always the same name at the start. So the default is the group.
Are those users in your account?
So yeah, these users are on my Active Directory. These are Azure Active Directory. So that's a good question, right? So they have to, these are the Azure Active Directory accounts that have to go in there.
Guest, or it could be a guest, right?
Yes, it can be a guest. So the other thing on this is the service metadata. So GDPR, the new California law, this is becoming more of an issue. Right now, I did the drop down here so you can see it's only for the United States. That is changing. And it's going to be soon. It's on the roadmap for this quarter, I believe, that if you have European customers, you can keep their data in Europe. It's not going to come out. But right now, it's all being stored in the US. So choose that, configure virtual machines. Let's get through, let me go. Okay, that's a good part. So this is where I said we do some recommendations, right? I had a client who was very confused about this whole layout. This is literally just our recommendations based on the number of users you're putting in and what you say they're going to be. And then, so, and I made sure to stop at this point. So heavy users, 2 users per CPU, or I'm sorry, per core. Medium, 4 users per core, light 6. This is literally just going to change the number of hosts that you're provisioning, all right? You can change this. Don't get stuck that this is something we're enforcing. You can do whatever you want. If you want to go in and change size, if you want a bunch of small cores, Have a bunch of small ones. You want to smaller number of large core machines, which is what we actually recommend, can do that. Custom is probably the easiest one. Custom, you just put the number of machines. It changes this goes from total users just to total VMs, and then just lets you choose the size. I stopped it before we got to the VM prefix. This is an important one just for your own maintenance. When you get to it, I changed it to 80.
Do you recommend following the recommendations or doing?
I recommend doing your own custom. I think for some things, like I said, like web users and office users, that's fine. When you're using your custom images, Microsoft doesn't know what you're doing, right? They could have built whatever they could have built into their images. You don't know what they're running. And there might, if this has an SAP client, if this is using Adobe, that could skew way out of control, right? Because that's such a heavy CPU intensive apps. It could really skew out. The virtual machine name prefix is important only because as these hosts come out, and I'll put it in there just so you can see it. So I just put intro. So whatever you put in here is what your VMs are going to be called. And as the host field, so if you're going to deploy 4, it's basically going to be the name -0. The next host is going to be -1, -2, -3 as you go in. So it's important between your host pools to have unique names, unique prefixes. Because otherwise they're going to, when you go to deploy another host pool, it's going to error out because it's going to say the machine name is already there. We don't do a good job of telling you that in the portal, but you'll find out very quickly if you try to use the same.
It's a lot like Dev Test Labs.
No, yeah, where it does, how Dev Test Lab versions, yeah, it's very similar.
Probably a dumb question, but why would you have different host pools?
So,
expanding existing pools.
so I have different host pools because I have different user types, right? So maybe I put my light users into a very specific host pool with smaller machines, bigger, however I want to do it, right? I also may size them differently. I may do scale differently. I may scale them by time differently. Maybe this pool is doing this. My images could be different per host pool, right? So if I have a very specific image in this host pool for this one, one-to-one desktops would be in a separate host pool than multi-session. So we're going to click through here eventually. So now we start to get into the virtual machine settings, and I'll let this kind of run through as I'm talking about it. So this is where your image source comes into play, right? So, and actually I want to hold that. Where's the mouse? So as I said, so from the gallery, these are what's available right now. The Windows 10 Enterprise multi-session with Office 365 Pro Plus, the multi-session without Office, just regular Windows Enterprise 10, which you can do for the one-to-one, or 2016 Data Center, which you would use for app polishing if you wanted to, or if you had a need for the server on that side. But as you look up here, you can do your manage images, and that's if you have it in the Azure repository. You can pull from there, from the image repository. Or if you just have VHD sitting out on blob storage, you can pull from there. So disk type, I went pretty fast there, but it's premium SSD, regular SSD, and then regular HDD. I still recommend premium SSD. I was copying stuff in. So you can see where I was making my error. So when you're going through this, you have, where I said the main join, the host or domain join, this is where you put in the credentials, right, for your local Active Directory. And then they're going to want the passwords. This is not cached. After this operation, it's lost. You can also use a user principal for this if you want to set one up, service principal, service count for that. It's up to you. You can also join specific, this just happened to the client. I had never come across before. They wanted to go, they didn't put their machines in the default OU. They had a multi-forest. They wanted to go for a very specific OU. So we had to get the full OU path and put it in. It worked really well. It wasn't an issue at all. I will tell you that there is, what did fail though on them is they had a really long UPN name. There is a hard limit of 21 characters. So if you're have a sub-force domain, like if you have a really long domain name, it's going to error out and it won't tell you why. It'll just tell you template Java error 6, which was a lot of fun to troubleshoot. So let's go through. You put the UPN in, the AD domain join UPN, put in the password. Virtual networks, again, the big thing on the virtual networks is it has to have access to Active Directory. For me, I just dumped it in the same subnet. That's not best practices. Don't do that your own thing because you'll want to secure your Active Directory subnet separately with MSGs. But for this demo, I just ran through it. So now we get into more of the virtual, this is where the tenant, so it's always called the default tenant group. And then you go into, so this is what we created when we first created the tenant via PowerShell. And then from here, you can use either UPN, which is an Azure Active Directory user who is a tenant owner or service principal in Azure Active Directory. So next, it's going to review it. It's going to do a validation. Sometimes these validations can get frustrating because you'll get really weird error messages. And that's where I got the UPN, the too long, which was, I said, just this weird template error. So then you'll see the deployment will start. I sped this up way past. The deployment took about 10 minutes. You're going to see this shoot ahead in a second. Yeah, so the deployment succeeded, and then I'm going to walk you through kind of what a deployment does. So when you start to look at this, it's basically making an availability set when you have multiple hosts, right? So it starts up the host pool available set. It's going to create the VMs, and then it's going to join into the domains. And then it's going to install the DSC extension for WVD, and that's where you're going to get the WVD file. That's where the agent's going to be installed and loaded. You see a lot of failures a lot of times in here. This is where you normally see your network fail. It's pretty frustrating. I will say you don't have to use this. You can do manually everything I just did with PowerShell and just installing the agent onto your image and registering, running a quick PowerShell to register the agent into your host pool. This is much easier than doing all that, but it's not necessary. And that will end that. So let me go back to this. So as I said, that was deploying the host pool. All in all, you can have a full WVD environment up within an hour if you really want to. And that is good for expansion, right? So if you need to spin up something quick, you can spin it up quick. It's not one of these things that you have to antagonize over. Did I provision enough? Did I not provision enough? Like when I was telling the client I was working with last week, it's a host pool. Kill it. If it doesn't work, if we don't size it right, we don't need to antagonize over this. Do your best guess. If it's not big enough, just redo a host pool and re-add the users. If it's too small, same way. Or just expand it out, scale it up, add it to the scale set. And there's scripts that will do that automatically, that will watch. You can do scripts by time. You can have it scale out based on what time it is. So say you know your workers coming at 8, you can start provisioning scaling out 10 extra hosts at 7:30. So when they hit the door, or when their time comes, they can log in and work. And then when they're done working at 5, you scale back down to 3 because that's all you have to run on the next shift. So you're only paying for that consumption during the peak hours when you're actually using. So this gets a little more into the FSLogix technology. I talked about it a little bit already. The profile container includes the 365 container, Office cache data, which roams with you, OneDrive, Skype for Business will be tuned soon, and the Windows Search database. So those things are all big that generally get created each time you log in. FSLogix kind of speeds that along. App masking is what we were talking about earlier, where you can hide your apps from certain users and keep a minimum number of golden images. This is a tricky one. A lot of enterprises use it or haven't started using it, but you have a problem with some of these older apps need old Java, right? You can basically load up all the different Javas and then mask it just like app masking. So the user only gets the Java that they need. So when you talk about the FSLogix core engine, this is kind of how this all works together in the driver architecture, right? So you have the normal Windows operating system at the bottom that sits there, and then the FSLogix agent kind of interprets or intercepts all the calls for the different containers, depending on what they are, and the Windows service drivers, and that's where Windows Service, the app masking rules kind of tie in. And then this is, of course, all on a VHD or VHDX sitting on persistent storage. And that's when you see it mount. When you see the FSLogix mount, it's actually mounts as a drive when you see it in the file system. And you can go into the drive interface manager and actually see it mounted. So you can quickly tell, did I not get some? It's easier to troubleshoot when you see something like that and it's actually there. So when you see the user login process, normally it goes through this. Where FSLogix comes in is the user profile, right? So the session initializes, authentication happens against the domain, and then when the user profile, that's when it attaches at that point. And then, of course, the group policies get applied at that point, and then initialize and the shell starts. When you start looking at Azure storage, this is just the different ways to use it. Again, Azure files or NetApp files. I didn't put the VM on there because everybody knows how to do a file server at this point, right? So it's just the way logically how this does. Instead of being data disks, you're just pointing, you have your OS disk, but everything else points to Azure files or NetApp files. NetApp files, again, it supports NTFS right now out of the box. It works. The main thing though is the 4 terabytes. So 4 terabytes, standard net apps in central US will run you about $700 a month in cost. Depending on your user profiles though, and how many users you're doing, that may be a good deal. That may be cost effective for you, it may not. If your users are small profiles, small drives, it may not be worth it for you. Also the NetApp snapshots work a little, in my opinion, where you can snapshot instead of doing the full backups, because you can't do the snapshots on this yet. So infrastructure management, we start talking about best practices. Again, with your images, we want to, however you patch and manage your images now, continue to use it. We don't want to put another layer of management on it. So if you're using Azure Update, continue. SCCM, or if you're using a third-party tool, it will work. Best practice studies, so there's basically a big document out there that goes through the best practice for configuration for your golden image. If you need it, let me know. Feel free to reach out and I'll find it for you. But it's on the web, so any of the documentation. And application masking technology, again, lowers those numbers of golden images and simplifies the app management. So this is an interesting discussion, right? It simplifies the app management as long as you're willing to publish your app management through PowerShell. Right? There's no really clean GUI that does it yet. It's coming. The app service does it a little bit, but even that gets confusing. So again, it simplifies it because it's all in one area, but it's hard to manage right now. Again, that's just the immaturity of WVD at this point. It's going to get better. If you learn it now, you'll love it when it comes out easier. So patch management, we always tell you to designate one host pool as basically the validation pool if you're using custom images, because that's the one when the patches will go first, will be designed to go to first. And that's the one that will also get the service fabric updates. So we're constantly, like any other PaaS service, right, we update the fabric all the time, what runs the host. Most times you never notice it, it works fine, sometimes it doesn't. Things happen. By designating a validation pool, those will go to that pool first before it goes to the other pools. So you're able to make sure that whatever we're pushing out isn't affecting a large amount of users. You can basically have test users on that. And again, if you're using service alerts, which I highly recommend if you're not, you'll get notified of all these updates. Because if you don't have service alerts notified set up, you're not going to find out about these things until they affect you. That's not a good one. Update VMs with existing Azure management, all VMs in the host pool, and then you can stage in the maintenance window. So this is why it's important to know about getting the service alerts. Because if you have a rollout, if you have a high processing time period coming up, and you're alerted that you're going to get patched during that time, put it on hold. Don't let it go out there and affect your users like that. SCCM the manager, your images, as we've said, and all VMs, this is important. So they all have to be at the same level, right? Because they're all working as a host pool. So they all have to be patched exactly the same. So the private file compare the FSLogix. The one thing we didn't touch on is Cloud Cache. So what Cloud Cache does is, have you ever been using an RDP client and you have an internet connection interruption, right? And it just kind of freezes on you, or if it's writing, you'll see spinning kind of thing. What Cloud Cache does is it kind of caches that in a local cache, and then but allows you to continue working to a certain point, and then when the internet signal reconnects, it transmits everything out. For some things that's okay, for other things it might not be. If you're transferring files and stuff, you just won't have file failure, things like that if you're copying stuff. So licensing and costs. So we kind of talked about this a little bit, that if you're licensed for O365 or M365, you probably already have a WVD license. So if you have any of these licenses, your users are in. If you're going to use server, so the thing, most people users own the VDA. So this option is actually an add-on, a virtual desktop add-on. This is for the non-Windows users. So if you're using Macs, if you're using Linux, you have to add this onto your licensing to allow those users to be able to connect to the WVD. Again, but if you're running server, you have to have RDS path set. So if you're using server to publish apps in the host pools, you still have to have RDS paths. If you're using Windows 10, you don't have to use RDS paths. You can just use the E3 license or the licensing up here. Does that make sense? I always get confused because, and you'll find people with mixes, right? That there's always a mix in where they're allowed to come in at. So this, a lot of times, I don't even get involved in this. I turn this over to the modern workplace people to figure out, and they tell them what they need to buy or they're good or not. So the other thing you'll notice on when you start looking at VM prices and using euros, because I stole this from the GBP out in euro. So this is the higher one, right? Yeah. So if I was to provision the DS42, they pay 668 euro because they're paying a Windows licensing fee. All WVDs by design come up as Linux boxes. Even though they're Windows boxes, you pay Linux prices because you're not paying for the licensing because you already have the licensing, as we just showed on the earlier thing. So the VM cost is substantially lower. So it's important when you go to price this out, if you're using the prices calculator and you're using to see what your solution, don't just go into there and check the VM pricing, actually go to the WVD pricing because it's going to be lower. Or don't think because you run X amount already, that same cost is going to transfer over. I will also say WVD instances are reserve instance eligible. So if you have reserve instances at those size, your pricing will count. I don't always recommend using it, and the reason why I tell people to watch the reserve instances is what I was talking about, the scaling, right? You don't want to, because when you buy reserve instances, those are 24/7. You're getting cost for it. They're cheaper by significantly depending on your time frame, but if you're scaling, you may want to limit your reserve instances to your lowest amount you always know are going to be running. So if you know you're always going to have 3 running, absolutely get 3 reserve instances. But if the rest of this, if you're going up to 10 during the day and scaling back and forth, you may not want to reserve an instance for that. You're going to want to run some math to see how often you're really running those. That's it. Thanks for coming. Hope you enjoyed the pizza. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, in a multi-session environment, let's say users have, they use Excel and they have an add-in that needs to be installed. Is there a way to have that add-in dynamically added automatically so when the user session kicks off, that add-in's already there?
So if you're using SCCM, yes, because now it supports multi-user. Intune will do it shortly. Other than that, you could play with the DSC extensions and install through that. Those would be probably your best options.
And is there a way, so in a multi-session, let's say we just wanted to publish Excel as the application. You know, you were talking a little bit about like maybe some limitations to that. Is that right? Like, can you publish a specific app within the
Yes.
multi-session?
That's a good question.
Yeah, right, that's right.
I think I would just use regular section.
Got it. But, and how would the backend determine where to launch?
So you basically publish, it's going to run it in different sessions. Let me think about that. So you would publish it to an app group, it would run it, would it isolate? Yeah, it would have to isolate. It would run almost like serverless. It would isolate it with each install. Your problem would be trying to think with that. Would that tab with that FSLogix? I'd have to test that.
Okay, so when you're talking before about so let's say you have an add-in that requires the user to be an administrator. If you're running in multi, then you couldn't install it at all, right?
No, you can't. Those users can't be administrators in multi.
But because they're domain machines, we could still manage them like a normal domain workstation?
Yes.
And use our deployment tools if they support SRO?
Yes.
Okay.
And again, more and more are supporting multi-session. It's fairly new, but like I said, we're doing it natively in SCCM now. Intune will do it shortly. And I'm sure the rest of the third-party tools will come across. Again, ask them if you're using something outside of that, just talk to them. I'm sure they have a roadmap or a timeline for it.
There's a question in the chat.
Sure.
Do all the VMs have different public IP addresses?
None of the VMs have any public IP addresses. They are all private IPs. You cannot get to those VMs. You have to come through the broker service.
Okay.
I have a question.
Sure.
So in terms of use cases, the way that I was considering using this was to set up like my primary dev environment, because I'm mostly a web developer. And then I could log into it from my MacBook, from my Windows computer, even a friend's computer in a pinch, and I have my environment all right there. Would you consider that to be a common or an ideal use case for this whole thing?
So for a single user like yourself, I would probably just stand up a VM and use password.
Okay.
Honestly. That's how I would probably do it. Because Bastion will allow you to connect through web interface from any other thing like that. Now I would, in that case, I would use Bastion.
Okay, thanks.
Just because it's a lot of overhead for one user.
Yeah.
Where Bastion is just.
When you're talking about the host pool and scaling and scale set, you said by timing and stuff like that, but what about by load? Like if it
Yes.
was undersized and it was getting pegged, could it, okay.
Yeah, so you basically set, it's a script there, and so again, it's a wonky script at this point. It's basically a server scheduler that you set to run to check the Azure. It's a script that will run however you set it, whether it be 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour, to check the load via Azure monitoring, and then make decisions based on that. If you set your rules, if it's head down at 70 or over 70, expand out by X amount of servers.
And that wouldn't impact people using it?
No, it would start. So, but that's an interesting question, right? Because it's not going to natively start moving, right? So if it's getting pegged,
yeah,
you can't. And just because it scales out doesn't mean it's going to start moving those users, right?
Yeah.
So they're going to continue to get pegged. Just new users coming in, we're going to. And that's interesting. I didn't talk about it because it's a little more advanced, but there's a deployment model when you set this up called breadth or depth, right? So do you want to stack your VM? If I have 4 VMs, do I want to stack the max users on one VM before moving to the next VM? Or do I want to do it the breadth of the VMs, 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2, 3, 3, 3. Again, it is more round robin. It's not, hey, this guy's heavy, move from here, we're not there.
For the customers that you're working with that are moving from Citrix, you know, what's, like, as you're working with them and they're used to having so much functionality within that space, where do you feel like they're hitting their heads in the short term with where the product is right now?
So the guys I'm moving from Citrix are using old Citrix, so it's almost coming comparatively. They're running on 2008 servers, so they're end of life. There's a lot of ecosystem around just the Citrix, and they don't want to use Citrix. So a lot of people get hung up on the fair share CPU. The Citrix workplace environment does a better job, in my opinion, of controlling those really obnoxious power users or that could kill hosts. We don't, and you can control it more granularly in Citrix workplace than you can in WVD. So that just gives you more control over it. So I think as the more deployments go out, that will be a big factor. I think you'll start seeing that, and you basically have to. It's a learning curve, right? You just have to start learning what your user profile. And a lot of times you'll hit that because people aren't taking the time to really understand their user profiles and where they should go and how they should set up their host pools and make sure they're sized correctly, make sure they're moving. Yeah.
Thanks again for your time.
No problem. I was happy to come out. Thanks for coming out.
We're talking about I was asking about the HTML5 interface.
Oh, do you guys want to see it? I
Yeah.
totally skipped that part, right? Got totally ahead of myself.
For everybody who came in a little late, we'll be posting the video up so you can catch the beginning portion.
So let's see. Now this is kind of awkward, but we'll work through it. So we're going to go to the WVD broker. So this is a really obnoxious URL. Alias it because no one's going to remember this. So this part's important, right? So I'm logging in with an Azure Active Directory ID. So now you're going to see this is what it looks like, right? So this is your tenant friendly name, and then this is your host pool. So this user, you can tell I'm in another tenant that I was demoing, but so this tenant, and this is the one I set up. So the video was actually this that I set up as to go. So the next thing you would do, so the user, and if you have apps that are done, they're going to show up just like that. So if you publish apps, they're going to show up in the same space. They're all going to show up, whatever you're assigned to in a tenant will show up in this subscription feed. So that's an important thing. So now users don't have to know individually what they're connecting to. Literally, if you give them rights to something or add them to the tenant and the host pool, they're going to get the feed. It is a true subscription feed. And I can show you the desktop client in a second, but there's actually a refresh button. So it's instantaneous too. So as soon as you add someone, you hit refresh, they're instantly going to get that right. They don't have to log out and log back in. So we'll go in here. So this is a Windows 10. So I don't have any group policies restricting this. So it's basically just asking me if I want to redirect that stuff. Say allow. So now this is where it's asking about the local Active Directory. Of course, my mouse is all wonky here. Give me a second.
You already entered credentials in place.
So I entered first level got me into the broker, right? So that was the Azure Active Directory. So now this is actually my local AD. This is me. This is actually logging you into the machine.
If we use AD sync to our on-prem syncs with our Azure AD, could it be the same credentials?
Yes,
And could they pass through potentially?
that's coming.
Oh.
It's not coming for the web side, but it is coming for the client. So the other thing you'll notice is, and I already connected to a session I was up on, but this is tabbed, right? So if you have multiple things open, it's just gonna tab them out.
Inside.
Inside the browser. It's like a sub tab. So you'll start to see that. So.
In the broker, we direct users to a PC within a network.
So, no, not on-prem. Are you talking about on-prem? And I just had this discussion. So no, it can't. But what we're doing is we're publishing the RDP client. So then basically what the use case for this was when people have a snow day, but they want to get to their on-prem thing.
Right. So like
On-prem.
secure.
So basically what's happening is we're going to publish an RDP app. So they're going to come into the broker, they're going to see RDP, they're going to click RDP, and that RDP will allow them to get to their on-prem machine. The problem with that is they have to know, unless you're using persistent, now you can get away with persistent caching, and so you could do like an RDP config and kind of click through that if you want to give them a desktop.
Yeah.
But if you just publish the RDP, they're going to have to know their machine name, and it's going to have to be able to resolve. So they either have to know the IP, and the routing will have to be correct, or they'll have to know the machine name and the DNS routing.
Yeah, so and if you're using that method, then is the RDP client running on one of the devices in the
Yes.
pool? Okay.
Yes, so basically you're RDPing to a device, you're inception. It's basically an inception.
Yeah.
I think it's a jump box, right? You're basically just using a jump box
Yeah.
at that point. I can't speak to the latency at this time, we're testing it. That's actually something I'm doing on Friday for this client, we just architected it. And then we're gonna stand it up on Friday. So the one thing I want to do is just show you a video while I was in here.
Let's start by talking about the last 4 years.
Wow. As humans, we go through so many ups and downs.
So again, this is
Some
RDP.
good seasons, bad seasons. Sometimes we want to give up.
Pretty good performance.
Take a very long break, and he's ready to express himself through music again.
This album is different because of where I'm at in my life. It's gonna be great. Jim. Weird. Just finished season. Now streaming. Only on YouTube.
All right, that's enough of that. You see the So you can see it's like video. I was able to move it around. It's a pretty good experience all around, right? So let's look at. Let's see if I can pull up the RDP client. Let me disconnect from this. So again, it's just a standard Windows 10. No group policies assigned.
Which marketplace image is this?
1903, I think.
That was the full.
Yeah. Yeah. So that image was without Office, otherwise I would have loaded Office.
Yeah.
That was with, and I should have loaded Office, I just wouldn't want to click through it. Let me throw this really back to RDP. So you're going to see I'm already kind of credentialed or cached on this. So I'm already in, but normally that would have, that's because I already logged in earlier on this. But what I wanted to show you on this for the feed is there's two, this is really, wait, why did that?
I think, did it maximize on the other?
Yeah, hold on. Maximize on this screen. Maybe it doesn't like this mode. Hold on. Let me pop this down. Get out of presentation. All right. Minimize. Let's see if it goes. There we go. Okay, so one of the things I wanted to show you was when I was talking about the details, this is the feed, right? It can tell you the last time it updated, the update. So if you publish something, it'll tell you exactly what you should be seeing. So it makes it a little easier to troubleshoot than you normally would have seen on some of the older clients. It shows you where it's coming from. and what user context you're in from the Active Directory side, or Azure Active Directory side. And then we'll click through. Oh, it's opening up over here. Sorry. So again, this is the local Active Directory. And of course, it's using the entire screen. So we're going to refresh over here. It keeps wanting to use the whole screen or both screens as an extension. So again, you can tell it's loading up, right? It's using both monitors like it would if you were local. Oh, I can't change it for the remote session. Yeah, it's just gonna use them both and be annoying. Yeah, so it's basically just using them. There is a way to manually override that by GPO to control how that's used. But again, same thing we saw before. It's an extended desktop, and that's the virtual extended desktop. So what you do lose, you can't see it from there, but maybe on my screen, that part, it's not tabbed, right? It looks like a traditional RDP client does at that point. All right, any other questions?
So on the PowerShell side,
Yeah.
is all the PowerShell stuff that you talked about, is that pretty well documented?
Yes, it's very well done. Yeah, there's only, and now there's a very specific module, it's not built in normally, so you have to import the module and then run it from there. And as of right now, there is no CLI component to it, it's only in PowerShell. So if you normally use AZ, you're going to have to go back to PowerShell.
I think I was playing with this, it's not in the cloud PowerShell either, the cloud shell, is it available there?
It is available.
It is, okay.
But you have to import the module.
Oh, okay.
So make if your cloud shell, you make your persistent storage, so you can import stuff, import it, and then run it.
I gotcha. Question on the storage aspect of all this. You said the NetApp storage is nice because it's a little faster, but the Azure Blob is probably pretty decent, or?
So again, if you need MPFS, you can't use Azure Blob, right? You have to drop it on a file server.
Right, but for like a simpler sort of deployment.
Yes.
Okay.
So if I'm just testing this, then I just use a file server. I just throw up a small VM.
Okay.
I just do a server share, make a file share, and drop it on there. I don't recommend that for production stuff. You can do it for production stuff, but if you're doing a pure cloud site where you don't need the NTFS-based permissions, and you're just doing file share with flat kind of permissions, then you can drop it. Anything else? We're good? All right. Thanks for your time, guys. I know we want, are we on time? Oh, we're actually on time. And feel free to reach out. Anybody who needs some help or discuss. I'm with Microsoft, but I'm actually one Microsoft Belux, Belgium, Luxembourg, and I work with their North American clients here. That's retired, so I was in the time zone. So I